everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to getting our DNA tested, taking a heritage DNA test by Men Try Videos. Now this is a channel I'm a little bit familiar with. I feel like I've seen a few videos here and there over the years, but not a channel that I've really kept up with in any way or something. These two guys I see in different videos and doing collabs with people, and I think there's like a podcast too that they do or something like that. Not quite sure what to expect for them. Both of them seem to have European ancestry, although one of the guys seems like he might have some sort of a Mediterranean ancestry or something like that, whether that be European Mediterranean or more of a Western Asian Mediterranean, or maybe even some North African ancestry, I don't know. I did see that they are using MyHeritage for this DNA test, which I did think it was kind of funny. The title is taking a heritage DNA test and not a MyHeritage DNA test, but they do say in the description it's MyHeritage, so we know who they're going to test with. This video is a little over a year old, March 6, 2022, so it's actually coming up on 2 years by the time this video actually comes out. Or at least this reaction. You know, it's MyHeritage, so nothing's really updated since then. But with all that said, let's just go ahead and jump right into the video.
Hey, Cam.
Yes.
Have you ever wondered what your heritage is?
Not at all. I know exactly what it is.
Well, let's hear it.
I am 10% Norwegian,
Okay.
37% Scottish,
No way.
60% Sasquatch, and 3 parts awesome.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, there
Add
you
it up.
have it.
Add it up.
He doesn't need to take the DNA test, but me, personally, I'm a mutt. I don't really know what I am.
You have a few parts of this,
I have-
a little bit of that, a sprinkle possess.
I have been told I am a little bit German, a little bit Spanish, perhaps maybe a little bit, what's the H one from Holland?
Dutch?
Dutch! A little Dutch!
There's an H in the word Dutch. That's close
that's
enough.
the one. I might be a little bit Dutch, and that's about as much as I know. Well, today we have our tests that have come to us from MyHeritage DNA.
Ooh.
Check these things out. They're freaking rad.
That's a pretty box. How do these work?
I think they're blood tests. I think we
Blood? I gotta bleed on this thing?
I think we gotta prick our finger.
I mean, can't you get it from like a mouth swab or something?
I mean,
I watch crime shows. They go in there.
How about we open it up and find out?
I guess that actually makes more sense.
All right. Okay, so it is just a mouth.
Ah, no bleeding here.
We're not bleeding today, guys.
Not today.
Cracking open the vial, you know, swabbing it up, putting it in, screwing it tight, sending it on its merry way.
One eternity later.
Well, we're back. It's been a little bit, and we finally got our results returned to us.
Now we get to find out what we is.
My big question, could we somehow be related?
We could.
But maybe
And if they are, we'll be able to see because they'd show up as genetic matches to each other.
down the line
relatives.
somewhere, we are
We could
related.
converge. There's a lot of
Well,
possibilities.
I should say everyone is related. If they are close enough related that they share DNA, it will show up. But there are relatives that you have, that everyone has, where you just don't share any DNA with them because of the randomness of recombination. And I don't remember how far out. I want to say it's usually, I want to say maybe like fourth cousins or so, when you kind of start to get into that region of it's a very, you know, the likelihood gets much more exponential. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with your ancestors too. You have ancestors that you descend from them. They are your ancestor, but you just inherited none of their DNA.
Now, this has been a big question across all the channels, really, that I've been a part of, is what is Austin's heritage?
Yeah.
Because everyone likes to think you're Asian, but I'm not Asian.
When you
I
were
think-
young, you looked real Asian.
I think I did look pretty Asian.
Maybe. Who knows, man? I'm excited to find out.
Okay, I mean, today we find out not only our heritage, but we also find out if our mom's our mom and our dad's
How are we doing this? Are we like discovering a little bit about each of us at the same time? Or are we doing the whole thing?
Yeah,
at
that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna
No.
go little by little.
Do the whole thing at once. I do not like it when people are like, well, you're this, and you're that, and you're this. We want to analyze the whole thing. You can't analyze one person's DNA by looking at one piece and then looking at it's going to be so confusing. So hopefully they at least show it on screen if they do that. I'm going to be so annoyed if they don't.
Realistically, though, do you have any real feeling as to what you are, like truly?
Just like German.
You just think German?
Yeah.
See, that's right. That's what I
Barbarian, maybe? Like German barbarian? You know,
Is that a thing?
they were like barbarian, like tribes in old Germany.
Okay. German and
Probably
Spanish. I just feel like I'm German and
I got
Spanish.
some Spaniard.
That's all I've been told my entire life.
Whew,
If I'm not
Swedish
those
in
things,
there?
I want to be so shocked.
But like, what if we find out that like your great grandma was a hooch and she didn't hang out with your grandpa?
I knew my great grandma. She was a saint.
That's what you think? Different
up.
times, man. They didn't document stuff like we do today.
They did. They documented tons of stuff. I know. I go through the documents all the time. It's my job.
If I found out anything that taints my great grandma's legacy, I'm burying it with
I'm
me.
done. It's going to your grave.
No one talks badly about
No
great grandma. No one.
Where do I start?
What?
Oh my gosh.
What?
How much? What's going on?
There is a lot of information here.
Really?
Give it all.
There's
Well,
a
detailed.
lot of stuff to
She's
go
making
through.
me nervous.
Okay, give us.
Austin, you have 8 ethnicities and 8 genetic groups.
Eight,
Cameron,
8 genetic groups? What does that mean?
we'll go into it. Cameron, you have
Now let's hope that this girl that's talking in the background knows what she's talking about, because I know one of the things that I've noticed in some of these channels where it's like they have a producer who like reads the results to them, and then as the producer reads them, they like kind of get this sort of sense of like knowing more than they do, and they'll start to say, well, that actually means this. I don't know if that's happened a whole ton of times, but I know I've seen enough videos where that's happened, where it's just like every time I hear one of those people in the background starting to read that stuff, it's like, okay, please don't try to throw your own spin into it.
have 4 ethnicities and 2 genetic groups.
I am a mutt!
I was gonna say that.
The big numbers first, okay? 29.2%. This is for Austin. 29.2% Irish, Scottish, and Welsh.
What? Irish,
Wow.
Scottish, and Welsh?
You're like a third.
AKA Northwestern European, which correlates with Germany. It's not too surprising.
Cameron,
Hold on, this has to sink in.
well, let it sink in together
Irish,
because
Scottish, and
Cameron
Welsh.
is the same, but 46.2%.
I'm what?
What? Irish, Scottish, and Welsh?
That's so much.
You're 50%.
Almost 50%.
I need to go to the place of my heritage.
Austin, 20.3% Scandinavian.
Okay, okay.
What?
And Cam,
Makes sense.
you're right there, Scandinavian with him at 30.2%.
Bro, are we related?
Dude, we're coming from the same place.
Oh my word.
So far, they're just typical Northwestern European admixtures, which I say this in every video. Every time we get Northwestern European, you're just going to get a huge mix of Scandinavian countries, Britain, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, probably French and German thrown in there too. And then even some Southern European, Iberian sort of stuff, not too uncommon either at smaller amounts. So the surprising thing would be seeing Eastern European or something not European in there for them at this point, because based on what they were saying, German and then the other being German and Spanish, you know, with the German and Spanish, we'll hopefully see a decent chunk of Iberian, which for the other guy, maybe not as much, or if any Iberian, but let's continue.
That's so much. That's like most of me.
Gosh,
It's like 75% of me.
if only they gave it all at once.
Okay,
So
a lot
much
of white
better.
people. Got it.
Very white.
Yeah.
This
This is where
explains.
the redheads come from.
Explains so much. This is why I can't retain a tan.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Same.
get tan, and then it's like the white fights it off me.
It does. It turns red and then maybe gets darker and then it peels off.
Yes, exactly.
What?
Okay, so
So far, no
Just make
German.
we
faces. I know.
are going to start getting into some more detailed stuff. We're going to start with Austin, okay?
So,
50.5%. That's the rest remaining of you.
Okay.
Comes from 6 other ethnicities and 8 genetic groups, okay? So
Okay.
let's get into this. Following Scandinavian, you are 12.1% Italian, 11.8% Iberian,
What is Iberian?
They're from Iberia.
Spanish and Portuguese. How can you think you have Spanish ancestry and not know what Iberian is? That's surprising to me.
Siberia? I'm just Iberian?
it is right around Spain. It's showing
It's Spain
That
and
makes sense.
the Iberian Peninsula, people. Come on, really? I know Americans are known for having bad geography, and people constantly are like, "Are you American? You know geography so well." But Iberia, come on. You said you thought you had Spanish ancestry.
Oh, my sense. There's your little, like, Spanishness.
There we go.
Okay.
Still no German.
All right, 5.3% of you is East European.
Okay.
Okay.
Funny enough, I'd said that would be a little bit surprising. So 5.6% Eastern European. If we're trying to decipher, okay, is that coming from one recent ancestor, then that would be coming from about a second great-grandparent. So the way that we figure that out is that you get 50% of your DNA from your parents, and they got 50% from theirs, and so on. So you just half each generation. And then whatever that generation that's closest to, or technically the one below and one above it that are closest to that percentage, that's kind of your starting point of where you're most likely going to see it. So at 5.6%, the closest would be 6.5%, or not 6.5, but whatever that 6 point whatever percentage is for second great grandparents, and then third great grandparents. So you'd be looking at about a second or third great grandparent from Eastern Europe, assuming it's coming from one recent ancestor. Now, there is the possibility maybe there's one ancestor through his mom's side and one ancestor through his dad's side that's coming from Eastern Europe, which then halves that 5.6% in a sense. So instead of looking at one second great grandparent, you'd be looking at two third or fourth great grandparents, or even further, or you might even be looking at a lot of different ones. So maybe he comes from a family that came from an area in wherever in Europe, but that like area in Europe was known to have been settled by a big group of Eastern Europeans that came over in the 1600s, let's say. So that's the kind of stuff that, can happen where, he gets that 5.6% and it's much more distant than a second great grandparent. Instead, it's really just like a whole bunch of like, sixth and seventh and eighth great grandparents, but then it just dwindled down to that 5.6% by the time it got to him because there was so much mixture with the other population groups.
Still, isn't Germany like
No
Western
German.
European?
4.7% is Balkan, and 2.8%.
Now that he is saying German, I should say with the Eastern European correlation to Germany, that makes more sense than thinking of it Northwestern European. So yeah, I guess maybe it is, the 5.6%, we do need to consider that Germany sort of thing. And now that he's also getting that Balkan reading, it's like, okay, well, understanding that he's getting Eastern European and Balkan, and he's coming from a German ancestry, but then he's also getting this high amount of general Northwestern European, then what that could mean is that he may come from a mixed German ancestry where he's coming from German ancestry that's much more southeastern versus much more Western. So with your German that's much more Western, that's going to correlate much more to Northwestern Europe, whereas the Germany from Eastern Europe is going to correlate much more towards Eastern Europe and the Balkans and even the Baltic states. So if he's getting Balkan readings in Eastern European and he's also got this known German ancestry, I'm not going to be surprised if maybe he gets a couple percentage points for Baltic too.
Is Finnish.
What is going?
Where's the
I got
German?
0 German.
So all of those for you were from Europe, and from America, you are 13.8% Mesoamerican and Andean.
Interesting.
What the heck is an Andean?
Now that is very, very that stands out crazy, because that would be the equivalent of a great grandparent that's fully Native American, assuming it's coming from one recent ancestor. And great grandparents, one of your grandparents' parents may be fully Native American. But once again, that's assuming it's from one ancestor and not multiple on different sides. So, if it's through, let's say each one of your grandparents just happen to also have a Native American ancestor, well, then you take that 13 point whatever, divide it by 4, and then whatever that is, it's like, okay, well, I guess it'd be maybe that far back. But that's just, a few ways to look at it. But that type of reading with an mostly European, that's huge. That is very big. Now, I should say, he did say that he had Spanish ancestry. So a big question that's popping into my mind is, where's that Spanish ancestry coming from? Because if it's a Spanish ancestry where he's like, well, my family's Mexican, or my family's Cuban, or my family's, Puerto Rican, or, something where it's like, okay, he just thought that he only had Spanish, but maybe he didn't realize that he also had a lot of this Asian American as well, or not Asian American, Native American. So if someone was building his tree, like if I was building his tree, that'd be one of the big things I'd look into instantly is, okay, identify all of his great-grandparents. Do any stand out as that? But that's also assuming that we don't find out that he's, Mexican or something like that. So if one of his parents is Mexican or one of his grandparents is Mexican, that certainly makes sense that, okay, well, they're probably going to have a big mixture of Native American in there. And so this Native American may not represent one recent common ancestor, but may represent many distant ancestors that in the 1600s and 1500s were mixing with a lot of the Spanish or, even more recent times. So
and Indian.
About Mesoamerican and Andean. The population of Mesoamerica and South America includes a number of indigenous groups with pre-Columbian roots.
Dang.
Are you saying I'm Indian? No.
Like Native South American.
Native South America?
Mesoamerican.
None of this is making
They
much
built some
sense.
cool stuff.
Dude, I am a straight up mutt.
How did that all get mixed in
I
there?
just got a little bit of everything. Wow.
So as far as your genetic groups go, Volga Germans in Russia, Kazakhstan.
Volga Germans, that definitely correlates very well with what he's getting in terms of having the Eastern European and the Balkan being representative of his German ancestry. And especially a lot of Volga Germans, I mean, they had settlements that, they're going from Germany to, the Volga River in Russia. And then a lot of them then coming over to, the Midwestern sort of areas, a lot of areas in Kansas and in a lot of the states surrounding there, Oklahoma. And in fact, I did a whole episode tracing the family tree of Mr. Beat, who also descended from Volga Germans, who then went to Katharinenstadt in Russia on the Volga River. And then from Katharinenstadt, they then came to the United States and founded Catherine, Kansas. So let's continue.
Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, and in Poland.
I have to give it to the producer so far. This producer is doing a great job of just reading the results and not being too like, well, let me tell you what that means.
So that East European group traces their roots to Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Hungary, and neighboring countries. And I believe that is kind of where the Volga Germans in Russia come into play. Does that make sense?
Yeah, see, the thing is that the Eastern European and Balkan that he would be getting wouldn't necessarily be as representative of the Volga Germans themselves, although Volga Germans weren't just German, but that, that would also represent the mixture of the local population into the Volga German communities. So like one great example, which is part of Mr. Beat's family ancestry, is that there were, I think it was over 100 different prisoners of war that were part of Napoleon's invasion of Russia, who were then resettled in Volga German settlements and communities. So there are, within that Volga German, those communities, there were mixtures of non-Germans. And it was also known that there were Dutch in there as well, and French and, others, especially considering that a lot of these Volga Germans are coming from areas in Western Germany near the Alsace-Lorraine area, which is, an area that the border has jumped back and forth a lot.
So Germans not from Germany, but Germans from
Russian Germans.
Russia.
No, they're not Germans from Russia. Volga Germans are Germans who were resettled around the Volga River in Russia. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were all German. There was mixture of others, local and, people from other areas, but they are Germans. It's not like they were just in Russia and then went to Germany. It's the other way.
Ukraine and Poland. And France.
So I'm more Russian than I am German.
Well,
Russian German.
I don't exactly
You're German's
know.
the
Learn the Volga German history. That's what you should do. I will say, he has super interesting results with this. Like, this is, his family tree would probably be a lot of fun to build, especially with the DNA, because for one, when you come from these various population groups and then you look at your DNA matches, pretty easy to pick out which matches usually you're coming from, which group that you come from, unless you're, you know, getting a lot of matches that also are very mixed. But usually you'll find, like, okay, I'm going to get a lot of my matches that have the Volga German ancestry. Then I'll probably have a lot of matches that have these other, you know, like his Spanish ancestry, and a lot of matches that probably have a lot of Native American ancestry.
Also genetic groups from France and Western Germany,
Wow.
Southwestern and Midwestern USA, and Mexicans in New Mexico and in Colorado.
That might be why he's getting that native reading, is if he does have Mexican ancestry.
Wow, this is crazy. So no black.
Maybe in your pupils.
Not even a little bit. As far as DNA matches go, you currently have 4,964 DNA matches that you can go through here in a little bit.
Like people?
Oh, please go through them on screen, not just like telling him about it. One of the biggest disappointments for me with a lot of these videos, they just don't talk about matches. So let's see what he's got to say about it.
4,000?
Yeah.
Like just other people that you're...
Which actually is, you know, that's a good amount, but like for someone like me coming from an endogamous population, I mean, we get tens of thousands of matches.
You have no idea what?
20 are extended family, and 4,944 are distant relatives.
Are they alive?
For example, yes, I believe so.
Let's get the family together.
Yeah, these are all people that have also done DNA testing through MyHeritage. And one of the big benefits of testing through MyHeritage is the fact that MyHeritage has some of the best representation of DNA matches from areas outside of what I like to call the English-speaking world. So when you are looking at people doing DNA tests at most of these companies, you're looking at people mostly in the United States, Canada, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. Those are like the big major representations, and then you'll get a good amount depending on the different sites from different areas. Like 23andMe, I find, is almost all American and Canadian. You do get some beyond that, but not as much. Ancestry, you get mostly English-speaking world stuff, but you do get a bit more from some of the other European countries. And then when you get to family tree DNA, I think that's kind of a mix too, but mostly like American and Canadian. But then you get MyHeritage, and you have huge representation in a lot of areas. And the big ones that stand out in my experience are, you get a lot of Eastern European testers. So I'm talking about people taking these DNA tests that live in those areas. So presumably these would be their relatives that descend from the ancestors that didn't leave, whereas they descend from the ancestors who left for America. And then the fact that he's descending from these ancestries that correlate to not only Eastern European, but also South America is a big one that MyHeritage gets a lot of. That could be huge in tracing his family tree. So let's keep listening what they say about the matches.
Wow.
For
Start a
example,
party.
lots of third cousins, fifth cousins, fourth cousins.
Okay.
Now remember too, she's saying third, fourth, fifth cousins, but they're just estimating it based on the amount of DNA. So the way these DNA tests work is they tell you a percentage of DNA that you share with your DNA matches, which is presented in the form of what's known as a centimorgan, which is basically just a measurement of DNA. And so depending on how many centimorgans of DNA you share with someone, you can get an idea of how closely related they are. Basically, once you get down to like 200 centimorgans and below, they just start saying everyone's about a third to fourth cousin, or third to fifth cousin, or fourth to remote cousin, or however that's defined. Once you get down that far, 200 centimorgans, which is about... I guess that's just under 3% shared DNA. But we even have these charts that we use in genetic genealogy to help us when we see genetic matches to figure out what's the most likely scenario, what makes the most sense, and then research from there.
So we already know what your 70%. What's the other 30?
Exactly. It's a great question.
You better have some Vikinger in you.
Dude, I would love it.
All right, 14.7% English.
Oh,
And
it's the most basic.
8.9% Greek and South Italian.
Bro! We're a freaking god! Call me Zeus!
Cam, your genetic groups. Mississippi,
What? I know a single person from Mississippi.
Wow!
Who is from Mississippi?
You're a catfish.
Yeah, I am.
And Mormons in Utah, Idaho, California, Arizona, Wyoming, and in Colorado.
And if that's the case, that means that his family tree is probably already really well built out, and it would take very little effort for him to build his family tree and then find something that's already expansively built online, most specifically Family Search, which is the Mormon website for genealogy. And you know, Mormons are a huge part of the genealogy community, most especially because of their belief in proxy baptisms, which is basically that you can be baptized in the place of your deceased ancestors, or I think anyone that's deceased, really. So people do their genealogy so that they can then help baptize their ancestors. But that's also one reason why with genealogy, you have so much stuff from the Mormons, but it also means if you do come from a Mormon ancestry, such as he does, he's going to have so much available documentation and everything for his family. I bet he has relatives who saw this and were like, oh, he fits in here and we already know all this and that.
Mormons, bro, I knew that.
That is, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
all over the place.
That's to be expected. But family in Mississippi?
Mississippi! Who the freak came from Mississippi? English? Talk about cookie cutter.
As far as
Or one of
DNA
you.
matches goes, Cam, you have 11 extended family matches
Okay.
and 10,781 distant relatives.
10,000? Oh my God! 10,000? Wow!
I'm related to all y'all.
Go ahead and start taking a look. You can see where all of your relatives are from. Where, well, maybe where they live would be a better way to put it.
Dang.
So, Austin, you do have a lot of relatives in Germany.
Straight from Germany.
So none in the close family. Now, extended family, I don't remember exactly how they define that, but I think those are going to be pretty decent, significant matches that are, you know, for those who are well versed in centimorgan amounts. I think the extended family are going to be like your over 200, under 800 centimorgan. So I had to go and take a look at my own MyHeritage results just to kind of see and figure out what they were meaning by close family, extended family, and it actually isn't quite what I thought. The way that they have it, the close family are going to be people that seem to be either 200 centimorgans of DNA or higher, and then extended family are going to be the people that are between about maybe 100 centimorgans and 200 centimorgans, and then your distant relatives are everything under 100 centimorgans. Now, I couldn't find anything that defined that definitively for MyHeritage, so I'll have to look into that and see if anyone knows. Comment below. But yeah, so that's, you know, with this, basically what we're seeing is that there's no family members here that would be, you know, super close, obviously. But we're also looking at with what relatives they are working with. It could be helpful in building out the family tree, but it'd probably be somewhat difficult with, you know, only 20 extended family and then, you know, the rest being distant relatives. So
So in USA, I have 2,577, but second place is Germany, 274.
So, although your DNA, your ethnicity may not be directly German, it seems like your family and your heritage seems to populate or come from there.
yeah, so I mean, that's the thing with these tests is that they're not really telling you where your family lived or you know, where your family's from in a sense. What it's telling you in the most specific terms is that these percentages of DNA correlate to the DNA that they have now defined as that population group, and that population group is defined by a group of testers that they use who then, you know, have only that known ancestry as far as they know, and so they figure out, well, what's the DNA amongst these, you know, this group of people, and then using that sample set, that's what correlates. So in a sense, what it's really saying is 29.2% of their DNA correlates to the Irish, Scottish, and Welsh grouping that MyHeritage has defined. Or at least the people that are defining that. But especially when you're dealing with population groups like Volga Germans, where, yeah, they come from a German ancestry, but then they also traveled greatly throughout the world, moving to Russia, then many moving to the US and elsewhere, and just, you know, having different local populations also mixing in with them as well, being exogamous, as we say, as opposed to endogamous, which endogamous is where you're marrying only people within your population group. Exogamous, they are marrying outside of that. So that's what really causes this weird readings sometimes that don't necessarily match up with like, well, I always heard we're German, but why am I getting all these other readings? Because it's very complicated.
Awesome. I can't get over the fact that I'm 29.2% Irish, Scottish, and Welsh.
Dude, I'm 46.
That is so bananas.
I don't know though. It's that Greek and South Italian that I'm really proud of.
That is 8.9% would be, that's a very interesting one with having a mostly Northwestern European ancestry, but also if he is coming from an American background, then it certainly makes sense that he would have a bit more of a mixture than just a typical Northwestern European. But being that he's also coming from a Mormon ancestry, if he looked into his family tree, he'd probably be able to find a family tree very well built out, and he may be able to quickly figure out where that Greek Italian is coming from.
I'll be honest, growing up, I always made fun of people who were super into their ancestry. But that was like young, stupid, dumb me at like 12 years old. But now I get it, man. This is cool.
It's wild.
It's awesome knowing your roots, knowing your heritage and where you came from and how you came to be. It's so rad.
Okay, so that was a pretty decent video. They seem to kind of have a lot of the general misconceptions that a lot of people have, or I guess a lot of Americans have, about kind of history and geography and stuff. It's definitely surprised that they didn't know what Iberian was, but you know, it's just it was very interesting results for the one guy. I wish I remembered their names. I don't remember whose name was what. For the one guy that was on the left, who had the really big mixture of ancestry, that seemed to be a really interesting mix, and definitely something that, you know, building his family tree, it'd be very interesting to see what stuff he finds. And this video is, it's about 2 years old. So since then, I imagine there are a lot more DNA matches, and I'd be interested to see if they've gotten any closer matches, or even more, if they've gotten family members to test, you know, how is that coming up with, you know, are they matching? Did anything disprove? For the other guy, definitely would be interested to see where is that Greek Italian coming from. At 8.9%, we're looking at somewhere between a great-grandparent and a second great-grandparent. Assuming it's coming from one ancestor, obviously could be multiple ones. And then having that reading showing the genetic community of Mississippi, those are pretty strong when you get those, because basically that's looking at a lot of your matches and saying you have a ton of matches saying they have ancestry in Mississippi. And so while there is a possibility that it could be off, it could be wrong, it could just be that maybe you have a lot of relatives that moved there at some point. Maybe you had a fifth great-grandfather who had a couple of siblings that all moved together to Mississippi, and your fifth great-grandfather moved to Utah, and then, you know, you just ended up having a ton of cousins in Mississippi because you had a bunch of relatives move there a couple hundred years ago. But that's just in reference to the communities and not the percentages. So the difference is you get the genetic percentages, which are then, those are the correlations of, we have these population groups that we've defined, and this amount of your DNA is correlating to that population group. They do that, but then separately they have the genetic communities, which then look at the matches you have and says, okay, looking at all of your matches, we see that there's a very high correlation of your matches all saying they have ancestry in this area. So it's kind of, you know, doing similar things but in different ways. And then they kind of combine those to create a much stronger idea of what your ancestry says. So with the Mormon stuff, I mean, he was like, yep, that's it. I know it. Mississippi was much more confusing, but start tracing your family tree and you may start to find, oh, okay, that's where it is. You know, either you'll find an ancestor who was from Mississippi or somewhere nearby, or you may find a lot of relatives moving to Mississippi for some reason. But I will say I was very happy to see a video actually talking about the genetic matches in some depth. Now, granted, most videos do absolutely nothing, so this just leaps beyond a lot of them. But I definitely kind of wish they maybe would have gone through a bit more. I think they showed the image for one of them. They said how many both of them had for their matches, but they only showed the one image, so it kind of would have been interesting to see both. But still fun to see some info on genetic matches. Now, if you enjoyed this DNA reaction, be sure to check out more of my DNA reactions, including this one right here. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.